Most of his indicted aides and lawyers have now gone through that same booking process. And in court, it can be worse when a defendant is accused of abusing authority or expertise even. Now, that is the alleged case with some of these lawyers, though this week, Giuliani is insisting the exact opposite, that somehow the very fact of indicting any lawyer would destroy rights.
They're destroying my right to counsel, my right to be a lawyer. They're destroying his right to counsel. It's not accidental that they've indicted all his lawyers.
Now, many argue the opposite. The problem for Giuliani and some of his co-defendants is that some very empowered prosecutors in Georgia and the DOJ say the opposite. Remember, the separate Jack Smith DOJ case lists several lawyers as co-conspirators currently unindicted. If you're wondering or keeping track as a legal matter, that doesn't foreclose anything. The DOJ could still later indict them or not. And the lawyers are indicted because of conduct that these prosecutors allege went way beyond legal services, arguments, brainstorming, or anything of the like, which is, of course, protected and not criminal. But let's be clear. The option of prosecuting lawyers and others is something Giuliani knows well. The Southern District office he once ran has indicted and convicted lawyers like any other citizen or defendant. And I'm not going to go through a whole list, but recent examples do include former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen, convicted by SDNY of tax and campaign finance violations. Or go back further, take an infamous lawyer linked to the mafia who mentored a young Donald Trump. Roy Cohn was a lawyer who faced sanction and federal grand jury indictment for alleged crimes. Being a lawyer as just a profession is obviously no defense in and of itself. As for Mr. Giuliani, he knows all this well because he spent 6 years as the SDNY chief. We put together this factual comparison, a story of his career, life, and law tonight. It's a set of images we couldn't have given you a couple days ago because it shows the rise and fall. This is the same post, by the way, the picture of the younger prosecutor Giuliani. It's the same post that other esteemed lawyers have held. James Comey, David Kelly, who was a guest on this program a few minutes ago, Preet Bharara. This SDNY office is formidable because it is tasked with a larger assignment than, say, Idaho or South Dakota. No offense to the prosecutors there, but it handles all federal crime in New York, from Wall Street to mobsters to terrorism. And that is another reason why this week's fall from grace is so intense for Giuliani. This is a former prosecutor who had a big portfolio, who seemed proud of it, and who wrote his whole career on it. And he used RICO against the mob. Today, he stands booked on RICO charges. This is the same leader who really built his entire portfolio by touting, and I want you to listen closely to what we pulled for you tonight, by touting high standards, tough law and order, and, quote, tackling corruption in government.
That was exactly the purpose of reestablishing this unit, to take a certain group of assistant United States attorneys and, in essence, free them up so that they could concentrate on looking at situations where there was evidence or possibility of corruption in government. And I think it's very necessary to do that.
In all three branches of government?
In all three branches of government and at all levels of government.
Listen to that. Corruption in government, all three branches. And let me tell you what Giuliani is accused of now, and there is a lot of evidence, including his own conduct, speech, writing, and statements to government proceedings, while he is legally presumed innocent. He is accused of lies on behalf of the federal executive branch in the service of overthrowing the incoming president-elect Biden administration. He is accused of fraud towards the judicial branch, some of which he partially has admitted in a civil case. And he's accused of a coup attempt carried out in the legislative branches at the state and federal level. The state of Georgia's legislative branch and the federal legislative branch of Congress. It is some kind of unholy trifecta, which really is contrasted with what you heard there. Defendant Giuliani does have every right to maintain his innocence, fight the case, even criticize the prosecutors in the system. He certainly has the free speech rights to do that, and legally he can have his lawyers make those kind of arguments in court. But I want you to note the brazen double standards that he seems to expect. Mr. Giuliani acting like the process itself and him being a part of it as a defendant right now is an indignity, is a scandal. He is saying he is above the law and the booking process that we're all subjected to and that he specifically subjected so many to. And I got to tell you, that echoes the apparent umbrage of another infamous Trump coup figure, Peter Navarro, who seemed not to be acting, but seemed to be really expressing himself about how he was treated by the United States criminal justice system.
Being prosecuted for defending an American citizen, that this is an assault on our Constitution.
They put me in handcuffs, they bring me here, they put me in leg irons, they stick me in a cell. What they did to me today violated the Constitution.
These are extraordinary and extreme assertions by people who are being treated, from all evidence we have, with not only professionalism, but with great patience and care. We've documented other stories, other cases where people accused of less have been treated far more harshly, as Maya Wiley also referred to tonight. Now, for a larger historical accuracy, nothing about what they're saying is brand new or unique to them. This is not the first time people accused of problems or crimes who are accustomed to deploying law and order for others find that it suddenly hits and feels different for themselves. Indeed, we've covered individuals like this who get religion, or whatever you want to call it, get woke, get alerted to problems in American criminal justice only when it meets them or their family. And they suddenly become supposed civil libertarians, or they suddenly talk up criminal justice reform. I can tell you right now, today, new reporting in our special report, Giuliani making waves by using his internet show to describe this process that he's long compelled on others. Now he seems to see it perhaps differently, or perhaps for the first time through the eyes of a defendant himself. I will say that within the remarks you're about to see, he did himself acknowledge that very duality.
Today, I was brought into a jail like one of the many criminals that I prosecuted. They required me to put up $150,000 bail, like I'm going to run away. President Trump has to put up $200,000. Just think of how that's done just to for public relations.
It went on like that. Just a couple points. One, you can hear, even as he's tried to absorb or process this, the apparent, indulgent, privileged BS shock that they would do this to him or to Donald Trump. So every speech about law and order and equal justice under the law is, unfortunately for Mr. Giuliani, somewhat shredded by his admission, which I would argue is a bad one for him, but people can debate it, his admission that he didn't think this system was for him. It was for somebody else. It was for they and them. Giuliani criticizing the process as well, second point, while claiming that it, in his view, was, quote, PR. Now, that's not legally accurate. In fact, we've shown how these bookings work for everyone. It may, however, be projection, because it was Giuliani, then eyeing higher office in the expensive media market of Manhattan, who, according to independent accounts, went farther than most other prosecutors to turn his bookings and perp walks of others into public spectacles. Let's review the record, as it's so relevant for this RICO defendant tonight. In his days as a prosecutor, Giuliani hyped the perp walk. Reuters reporting on how he, quote, knew the public relations value of making defendants appear in handcuffs before the media on the way to arraignment, something he was not subjected to in his booking yesterday. Indeed, quote, in the 1980s, the New York Times notes he built a tough guy reputation by marching accused Wall Street types before the press specifically. So, yes, it is often projection. Now you have Giuliani facing not a perp walk, because he got to walk out of his own volition, but still, yes, many reporters gathered. And this time it is very different, as he is the defendant.
You had the opportunity to refute it, though, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor, that's it. We gotta go.
Mr. Mayor.
Back it up. Mayor, turn the election
Mr. Mayor. Hey, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor.
The point is not whether he liked or disliked it or to take any emotional response to it. The legal point is he was afforded far more deference than many of those others. The perp walk was a handcuffed spectacle. There, he's just leaving. Now, again, I emphasize he is presumed innocent, but it is a stunning fall from grace for a former federal prosecutor to indicted coup plotter who's already seen New York suspend his law license, who went from person of the year in the wake of 9/11, America's mayor, a nickname he proudly invokes to this day after the 9/11 attacks, to now indicted over corruption and alleged coups launched against the very branches of government you heard him talk about protecting in his time as a prosecutor. He has become really the legal face of the attempted coup, a far cry from the law and order conservative he claimed to be.
I think that the Republican Party should be a broader party than some of the direction of the party right now. I'd like to see the Republican Party be a more independent, a freer party, a party that reaches out in a broader way.
Now, the Republican Party doesn't have to reach out. That's partly about electoral strategy. But we are a long way from reaching out when we are reaching in to overthrow what the voters actually chose in a democracy. Giuliani talked up law and order. Now, he used the skills, the prestige, the reputation he may have gathered for however long in the opposite direction. Now, we may not know exactly why he got there that way, what motivated him. But the legal point tonight is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how hypocritical he's been. It doesn't matter whether this is about legally him versus them, right versus left, white versus black. Although all those issues may ultimately prove relevant, the bar to convict him is much lower.